The next item is conduct of business, is residential design guidelines.
Thank you. As the Planning Commission remembers, just a few short weeks ago, the Planning Commission and the City Council met in a joint format to review the residential design guidelines, the draft version. I was not there at the meeting, but I heard that Laura did an excellent job in my place presenting the residential design guidelines and where we've got to to this point through a subcommittee process that includes 2 planning commissioners as well as 2 city council members. And because it was a short time frame, a study session, we were able to get through the document itself, but not to the policy changes that were recommended by the subcommittee that would both make this a more effective document as well as a document that's consistent with the municipal code. So there are 3 areas where we are recommending policy change or code changes. We did give the same presentation to the City Council last week, and they provided us with feedback. And feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions or if you want to give me feedback on any one of the individual policies. The first has to do with a consistency finding, and not many people in San Bruno know that not all additions or exterior modifications to single family or to family homes actually have to go through an architectural review process. I would say only about 10 to 20% of them have to do that, and that's only if they require minor modification, if they require a use permit, or something that requires discretionary review. If not, it goes straight to a building permit. Somewhat unique about San Bruno. Although our planners do our best to recommend changes during the building permit process that would make it more architecturally compatible, there's nothing within the code that states that the homeowner would have to implement these changes. So one of the first recommendations of the subcommittee was that these residential design guidelines should apply to any homeowner that's proposing exterior changes to the home. So anyone that's changing the look of their home or bumping out an addition, something that would change the appearance, they would have to be compatible with the residential design guidelines. And the way that this would occur is amending the municipal code to say that any addition or any exterior change that requires a building permit requires the community development director to make a finding that that design is consistent with the basic design principles within the residential design guidelines. And the reason the subcommittee and staff feels that this is a good route to go is that, number one, it gives teeth to the residential design guideline, actually puts something within our municipal code that someone on staff for lower level additions actually has to make that finding. But at the same time, it allows flexibility so that the homeowner doesn't have to meet each letter within the residential design guidelines, but just has to meet the general spirit or intent of the design guidelines. So that's the first half of this area. The second is that the same finding would be applied to items that are heard by the Architectural Review Committee or the Planning Commission. So you would also have to make that finding that a use permit or an addition is consistent with the basic design principles within the residential design guidelines. I don't know if the Planning Commission has any questions related to that.
Through the chair.
Yes. Commissioner Peterson.
I didn't find attachment 1, the table.
Let me take a look. Okay, that was not there. Which table was it? Okay. What we will do is that was it was basically a written form of what I'm saying, what I'm giving the presentation tonight, showing what the policy change is and the reason behind the policy change. What we will do is include it when we actually take these code amendments and the residential design guidelines to the Planning Commission. We'll also provide you with that table. I apologize for that not being in there. So ask me extra questions just in case if you have any. The second one has to do with parking. Tonight we had an application for an existing home, and as you know, as the Planning Commission knows well, if you have an existing home in San Bruno with a 1-car garage, the only reason that you would be triggered to put that second garage space in is if you exceed 1,825 square feet of floor area. So there's many homes, there's a lot of homes in San Bruno that actually are built with 1-car garages and do small additions, still have a relatively small home and are able to keep that 1-car garage. Our current code actually isn't consistent with that. For new homes, regardless of the size, you have to build a 2-car garage, and also regardless of the lot size, you have to build a 2-car garage. So this is made for many awkward designs where you have a 25-foot wide lot or 37.5-foot wide lot that's dominated by the garage, where you have a two side-by-side garage where basically the front facade is entirely garage, or they opt for a tandem garage space, which makes for a very awkward floor plan, which makes an unusable first floor with maybe a family room and back, and just not a lot of usable area, and the second garage space doesn't end up being used in the long run. So what this change would do is make the two consistent. If you decide for substandard lots, if you decide to build a home that's less than 1,825 square feet in living area, you'd only have to provide that one-car garage. And I think that would have two direct impacts. The first direct impact is that there would be better design, because you wouldn't have a garage be the dominant characteristic of design. And the second would be that you're encouraging smaller homes by having the incentive that you only have to spend money on this one-car garage space. So I don't know if you have any questions regarding that policy.
Are there any questions from the commissioners?
All right. This third one we presented to the City Council, and they gave us feedback on it. We presented with 3 different options, and we are looking for the Planning Commission to give the feedback on this as well. Within the current code, there's 2 landscaping requirements, or 2 impervious surface requirements. The first is that you can't have more than 80% impervious surface within your lot. And for people listening at home or for Planning Commission's sake, impervious surface doesn't allow rainwater to drain into it. Pervious surface is landscaped area or some type of pavers that actually allows rainwater to drain into the ground. So we have the 80% requirement, but that applies to the entire lot. So you could actually meet that 20% pervious surface requirement anywhere within your lot, which leads to a lot of homes in San Bruno, not a lot, but in certain areas, a lot of homes in San Bruno, completely concrete front yards. This leads to 2 problems. A, it's a drain on our stormwater system. By having all the rainwater go directly to our stormwater system, which is older, you're putting a lot of burden on that system. And then from an aesthetic standpoint, it's not something that we encourage within the city to have a completely concrete front yard and not have landscaping or pervious materials in there. So with that in mind, the residential design guidelines propose requirements, and we are proposing 3 different options. The first 2 options would actually amend the municipal code and require that even if we came across a case where someone already has completely concrete in the front yard, the city would have the ability to actually make them change that to meet these requirements. So the first is that you would have to amend it so that there has to be pervious surface material within the front yard. But it would not specify that it has to be living landscaping material, but it could be pavers or something along those lines. The second option would be about the same, but it would also say that has to be living plant material. So that all of it would have to be living plant material. And the third option would say you keep it in the residential design guidelines, but you don't actually amend the municipal code. So it would be more of a slow progress where you would only be able to influence the applications that are before you and not problem areas within the city. To relay the City Council's recommendation on this, they like to blend the first and second policy, in that they would prefer that not all of it have to be living plant material in the front yard, but at least a certain percentage of it be living plant material. And they did like to see the municipal code amended so that not necessarily giving the direction that we should go out there and make everyone tear up their front yards if it is all concrete, but more treat it like we have our fence policies right now, where we have some outdated fences within the city of San Bruno, and we basically, on a complaint basis and on a problem basis, we enforce the current municipal code. So with that, those are our recommended changes. The next step with this is after we get your direction, we'll make the changes that were recommended at the joint study session, and then take it through the approval process, which includes back to the Planning Commission for both the design guidelines and the municipal code changes, and then to the City Council for final approval. So we could take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Through the chair.
Commissioner Anderson.
My question is towards the third option, which is, sorry, I've lost track of which option I'm talking about, but essentially the idea is that if someone decides that they're going to not plant grass and not grow anything on it, but the topsoil is exposed, or they do xeriscaping, how is that calculation allocated? I mean, it seems like if someone decides I'm going to totally neglect my lawn or my front yard, and I'm trying to figure out how that works.
That's a good question. It's something we would have to work out within the code. I believe performance standards for commercial require that the landscaping actually be living landscaping. We also have requirements within our municipal code related to tall grass and dead grass when it comes to fire season. But I think that's the recommendation that we could take, that if someone does want to do xeriscaping, or they do want to do, you can't just have a dirt front yard to meet the requirement.
To the chair, I guess where I'm heading in this is, if for xeriscaping you cover your front yard with wood chips and you do 3 plants, does that count? I mean,
the way that the city council moved forward with it is that they said they wanted to see some living plant material there. What they really want to see, and what we're going to address within the zoning code as we do our whole sustainability audit within the zoning code, is that it be a native drought-tolerant landscaping, something that may not actually require irrigation, or at most requires minimal drip-type irrigation, or something that's easy to maintain. So I think that if we did do something like you're saying, and actually something similar to what the city council said, is like they'd like to see some mixture. So if you did want to have some bark or some rocks in your front yard, that it also be mixed in with some drought-tolerant landscaping.
Through Chair, I think my intent would be to write it in such a way that it promotes prevention of stormwater, addition to stormwater, essentially. Okay. So if you have, I'm thinking about my yard where I'm on a slope, and if I don't landscape it, or if I landscape it badly, all the water is going to drain just right off the curb into the stormwater system. But if I create in such a way that I can make some swales, or if I can create some depressions, or create some kind of an environment where I can mitigate water from running off, then I'm actually satisfied the intent, but not really done too much. I don't know, I'm thinking of it in that direction, where you get the intent, but essentially you're not creating an overburdening situation.
Correct, and I think if done correctly, that if it just wasn't dirt, if it was some mixture of rocks or bark or something like that, right, you would meet the dual intent of aesthetics as well as stormwater impact. Okay.
Through the chair.
Commissioner Peterson.
My first question is a facetious one. Will there be a competition for the badge for the aesthetics police?
The beautification task force may look, and maybe they will have. I know that they do have an award for landscaping and best improvement, so maybe this will play into future award winners.
Perhaps a Warhol painting.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson.
Let's see. The concern, the reason this comes to mind is because of a serious question here. One of the things you said was that this impervious surface here on number 1, it could be pervious pavers. In other words, those modern pavers that perhaps have openings where some grass or green material can grow. And at the same time, those one of the purposes of those oftentimes is so that vehicles can drive over them and not make ruts. But I can see how they might also drive over them and park. Is there currently an ordinance that specifies how much of the front yard can be used as parking?
Yes, it's not actually a certain percentage of the yard that you could use as parking, but it dictates where within the front yard that you could park. You're allowed to park in the driveway and on the short side of your yard. So if you're looking at a home and you have a driveway and the garage is centered to the left of the home, you're allowed to park on the left-hand side, but not able to park on the wide side of your lot, which is the right side.
Matt has a drawing if you want to see it.
Yes, I'd like to see that.
Yes. we could,
Well, okay, basically, and the reason I'm asking these questions, these are going to sound like negative questions, but the reason I'm thinking of them is because some of these approaches are so sweeping that they could be very, they could hit an awful lot of properties in San Bruno, which essentially means that you could have a law that's almost asking to be flouted simply because enforcement is totally impractical. Not to mention that if a majority of the citizens that were affected didn't like it, you just end up reversing it as soon as you put it out. So what I was trying to think of was how can you do some of these approaches and have them be practical. One of the things I would suggest to staff is, and I think you've probably done part of this, but not just in, I'm thinking on Taylor Street, there's some areas that are all concrete in front of the residential areas. And in those cases, it's almost hard to see anyone coming out there and being required to jackhammer all that concrete. So the first instance is, what if you have virtually the entire front paved already? How does your new ordinance affect this?
The first thing that I'll mention is that many of the homes on Taylor, I mean, the biggest areas where it's concreted over, there's a lot of homes in the avenues that have been fully concreted over. There's homes in the area around the heart of the city, around Taylor and Garden and those areas where there is all concrete in the front yard. One suggestion that the city council had, which I think is a good condition, is that in places, in properties where there's substandard front setbacks, so setbacks less than 15, the community development director has the discretion to either waive the requirement or reduce the requirement on a case-by-case basis. And this is because you have many homes in Taylor that have maybe 5-foot, 7-foot setbacks, where it just wouldn't have been, a lot of it, maybe it's just a 25-foot wide lot, where a lot of it's dedicated to a pathway or some way to actually get to the home, where it wouldn't be practical to have 65% or whatever percentage landscaping within the front yard. So I think that would reduce the number of cases that we would actually have to take on. I think the fence analogy is probably the best one. When we amended our fence codes, when fence codes have been amended throughout the years, it has left a lot of fences within San Bruno inconsistent with the fence code, and we typically only enforce those. Our code enforcement division is on a complaint basis, so we only enforce those when we get a complaint or we see something that's causing a problem. So I think we would take the same approach to this, where if let's say there was stormwater problems within the immediate neighborhood in terms of capacity, I think that we would have to go and take a look at what's causing those problems, and if that ended up being the homes, we'd have to find some way to mitigate that.
Well, coincidentally, for whatever reason, quite a few of those places are in the flatter section of San Bruno, which are guaranteed to have drainage problems.
Correct.
Through the chair.
Commissioner Shaw?
Okay, I just had a couple more, if I could. How about, there are quite a few places that are not paved, but people are parking vehicles in a way that doesn't meet the allowable residential parking on this figure that staff provided. Is that one that you would approach only on a complaint basis also?
We've typically, yes, and what usually happens is we'll get neighborhood complaints that basically say, I'm tired of everyone on my block parking this way. Can you please go out there? And then we'll go out there and we'll tag the homes with notice to complies. And generally that solves the problem for a while till it comes back. Part of the problems in those neighborhoods are lack of parking because people have converted their garages, aren't using their garage, so they use that area. So that that is an ongoing struggle. And some of it, you know, over the years, if we enforce this rule, that struggle won't be there anymore, because it's more difficult to park over a landscaped area than it would be to park over even most of those areas that people park in their front yards. Some of them may be dirt, some of them may be dead lawn, but a lot of them are the ones that have been concrete.
Okay, and so this helps clarify my thinking on this. I'm thinking that oftentimes these kind of regulations, which have the potential for being problematic or difficult to enforce at best, it's better to take them stepwise. In other words, do something fairly simplistic, and if that's working out, take another step. And so what I'd like to suggest is that you consider an approach where the requirements are applied to projects that are getting building permits or planning commission permits, and then focus on ones that aren't getting any permits as another step. Don't drag all of those people into the same enforcement effort. It almost seems to be unreasonable on the face. Thank you. And I think generally I am on the committee that's involved with this, and this has been one of the most problematic things. And I'd like to mention it to the commission as a whole. When we've met with the council representatives, a lot of times the issue has been, well, we now have this document, this guidelines for good development, more or less. But the question immediately comes, are people going to look at this and say, oh, that's nice, and do whatever they want, or is there going to be some kind of ordinance that says they have to pay attention? Because if there isn't, many people are not going to pay any attention at all. The problem being that it brings up some questions like this, which I think are very challenging. I thank the Commission for their patience.
Welcome. Commissioner Mitchell, you had
I'm going to retract it.
You retract?
No comment.
Okay. I have a question. If there are homeowners who purchased their homes that were paved fully or just compromised with any greenery, is there any opportunity or funds, or I mean, I know that budgets are cut so drastically at these times, but is there anything, if they were to come, a group of people to come and say, you know, we would love to do this, we need support, is there anything available to them?
I'm not aware of any funds. I mean, there are, you know, through a redevelopment agency, if they're doing larger projects, we have helped out with construction with low interest loans and things along those lines, but I can't think of anything that would help with actually breaking up concrete and landscaping an area.
Mm-hmm.
Although there are nonprofits like Rebuilding Together that perhaps could help with things like
Sure,
that.
sure. Well, there's so much criteria around being eligible for that project,
Yeah.
but you know, through this, and I'm thinking, well, gee, that would be great to think that there was a community of people who say these were paved by, you know, back years ago, and we'd love to see this happen, but it really isn't a project that's affordable at this particular time. So hoping that there was some redevelopment of some sort, but I'm sure that if there was, you'd bring it to our attention.
And that's not to say I'm just saying right now there
Right.
isn't, but you know, that could be something that we could investigate.
And then the other is, the question that I have is around, the pods are becoming more popular, those storage units that are in front of homes and businesses. And I understand those, in construction, they're really useful to have. And so I don't know if there's been any comment or input towards your office around these. I'm seeing them more. I have one myself in the process of construction, and so I wanted to just basically get your input on that.
Our policy is that, you know, you have to have an encroachment permit if you're actually to store them in the street, but we generally don't allow an encroachment permit to go for that long. We allow them to be within the driveway while they have an active building permit, or they're in the process of getting a building permit and need to store things during the construction process.
Okay, so they're in alignment with the building permit.
Correct.
Which sort of, which gives them the,
Yeah.
that's good, that's great. Thank you.
Through the chair.
Commissioner Busati.
I'm in agreement with the City Council in regard to item 1 and 2, a combination of those. What can we do to encourage sustainable landscaping? Limit lawn areas? You know, what items can we add to this? I mean, we're giving it, I agree with changing the code so that there's some teeth to this. But what can we do in addition to that to encourage people to use sensible landscaping?
I think the short answer to that is require it within the code. But I think that's something that we'll be discussing with the Planning Commission and with the City Council as we do our full-on zoning code, comprehensive zoning code amendment, which will be the first comprehensive zoning code in almost 30 years. So I mean, it's going to be a real chance to take a look at everything from a sustainability point of view and do the sustainability audit and see where we're missing right now and where we could do better and, you know, be the leaders within that area. And a lot of it could be, you know what, you can't have lawn in your front yard, or you can have a certain percentage of lawn within your front yard, and the rest has to be drought tolerant light landscaping.
Okay. Well, just my opinion, I'd be in favor of item 1 and 2 combined together with some sort of promotion of sustainable landscaping, a limit on lawns, or you know, maybe the community development director having some latitude to approve creative designs. You know, someone may come up with something new or something different, and there should be some latitude for you to work with that.
Great. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions for staff? My last question is on, there is quite of sort of this new trend towards, I don't want to say, you know, the turf, that new type of grass. It's been at many of the fairs. They're presented in golf courses and football fields. Has there been any projects in San Bruno that have that are visible to the public? And what's your thinking around it?
Yeah, I haven't seen. I've heard of people within San Bruno installing it, and I know that it's becoming more and more popular. Mm-hmm. I don't know offhand of any of the addresses, or if there's been any of it done within the front yards. I'm most familiar with it, seeing it on the football fields and soccer fields, and it really does. I mean, I think it is, you know, when cities start to regulate the amount of lawn that you could have due to water issues, or even if the state or federal government starts to regulate lawn issues, that this is going to be, and if done right, it does look good.
Mm-hmm. If done right, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair.
Commissioner Peterson.
Yeah, if you're interested in one that received an award, there's one on Bayview in Millbrae that's just toward the airport from where Santa Lucia intersects Bayview. It's about halfway down the hill.
Are you referring to that particular lawn or landscaped?
Landscaping in front of the house received a City of Millbrae award. There's a sign, small sign on the lawn. You can see.
It does not have that artificial type grasses.
Yeah, it's artificial turf.
Okay.
Plus wood chips and xeriscaping.
So that was Bayview, and
it's just about halfway down the hill toward the airport from Santa Lucia. I think it'd be about, let's see, about 525 Bayview.
Mm-hmm. But on Bayview. Okay, thank you.
You want to know why I know the numbers, right?
Through the chair.
You
know, I was in Menlo Park a couple of weeks ago doing a walking tour of a couple of neighborhoods, and they had done a really fine job of promoting sustainable landscaping. And in retrospect now, thinking about it, they did a lot of encouraging edible landscapings. We might want to include some of that language in our ordinance or in our green, where we encourage people to put edible items in their landscaping. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?